Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the training compound in Coronado. The morning sun cast long shadows across the obstacle course, a stark landscape for a new beginning. Transferred with little fanfare, she watched the SEAL candidates running their drills. She was no stranger to military life, the daughter of a Marine colonel who knew that strength rarely looks like bravado. 12 years in the Navy had sharpened her into a specialist in strategic operations, a field where obsession with detail is the only thing that keeps you alive. The base was buzzing. A new class had arrived, filled with eager young men who thought they knew the cost. Sarah watched them with a mixture of sympathy and amusement. What these men didn't know yet was that only a small percentage would endure. Fewer still would truly understand the cost of being part of an elite team. Commander James Harrison approached. He missed nothing. He had requested her transfer personally, knowing she was what this unit needed, even if they weren't ready to see it. The facility was a sprawling labyrinth of mock cities. Sarah had spent 48 hours memorizing every inch. She believed in knowing the terrain before the first shot was fired. It was this meticulous approach that had kept her alive. To her, every routine was a potential battlefield, and every detail a matter of survival. Near the armory, instructors shared stories. Their camaraderie was effortless, built on years of shared trauma. Sarah watched from the shadows, an outsider looking in. She recognized the faces from briefings, but to them, she was a stranger. Soon she would be working alongside them. Respect would have to be earned through action. Inside the main building, the atmosphere shifted. The walls were lined with the history of the SEAL teams, a visual reminder of the legacy they carried into the dark. Sarah paused before a photo of a team in Afghanistan, their faces obscured by war paint. She had been in places like that, though her role had always been in the shadows. She was the architect of the invisible, working behind the scenes to ensure the operators came home. Her background in strategic support was unparalleled. Her official role was liaison officer, but Harrison had hinted at a special project, one that required her unique, often lethal skill set and ironclad patience. In her world, waiting is 90% of the job. She trusted Harrison enough not to press for details before the time was right. Patience was her greatest weapon. The sound of voices drew her toward the briefing room. She checked her watch. It was time. Her military bearing was evident in every step she took down that hollow hallway. In a community this tight-knit, trust is earned through action. She needed to show them her presence was no political gesture or bureaucratic mistake. As she entered, conversations died. Faces turned, curious and guarded. She was an outsider in a world that remained predominantly male and intensely private. Sarah met their eyes steadily. She didn't apologize for her presence. She simply existed in that space with a quiet authority that couldn't be ignored. Taking a seat in the back, she prepared to observe. When the moment came, she would prove exactly why she had been summoned to Coronado. This was just the beginning. Before she became the legend we know, she was Sarah Chen, the woman who understood that informed courage always outlasts raw bravado. Wait for the report. The truth is always in the details. The Coronado assignment is only part one of a much larger story. Stand by for further intelligence.
The briefing room at the compound filled quickly. The low rumble of veteran instructors bouncing off cold concrete walls. Sarah Mitchell remained quiet, a shadow in the corner observing the unspoken hierarchy and the subtle dynamics of power. She noted who deferred and who commanded. The details that mattered in units where official rank didn't always reflect the true power structure. Commander Harrison entered, bringing a sharp silence to the room as he moved efficiently through the morning's training agenda. The atmosphere shifted when the commander's gaze settled on Sarah, gesturing for her to stand and introduce herself. She rose smoothly, her voice a clear, professional frequency in a room tuned to gravel and the weight of combat experience. Her name, rank, and previous assignments were stated with the vagueness mandated by deep security protocols. In the front row, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Blake remained a wall of skepticism, his massive frame straining against his sleeves. His face was a map of 15 years in the teams, a record of multiple deployments and a reputation for uncompromising competence. Blake offered no words during her introduction, but his body language spoke volumes of a warrior who believed only in the test of worth. To him, without a combat patch or the salt of the team, Sarah was unproven. A ghost in a world that only valued physical sacrifice. Sarah didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that energy spent on the closed-minded was energy wasted. Action would be her only response. The meeting dragged through the routine of policy updates, a procedure that Blake seemed to view as entirely beneath his notice. As the room adjourned, Sarah headed for the exit, her mind already on the personnel files awaiting her in the intelligence office. But the sound of heavy rhythmic footsteps and a gruff, challenging voice halted her progress in the quiet corridor. Blake stood in her path, his expression a mix of condescension and predatory curiosity, as he questioned her very presence here. His tone implied that whatever her assignment was, it couldn't possibly hold weight in a world built on blood and sacrifice. Sarah responded with the calm of a professional, detailing the intelligence coordination and the classified projects she was assigned to lead. But Blake stepped closer, a physical intimidation tactic designed to force a retreat and assert his dominance in the compound. He declared this a SEAL compound, a place where respect wasn't granted by rank, but earned through sweat, pain, and the water. He demanded to know what she had done to earn the right to stand among the best of the best. Among warriors, the hallway fell silent. The eyes of the entire base were watching, waiting to see if the newcomer would break or hold her ground. In that quiet corridor, Sarah Mitchell knew her next move would define her legacy. She could defuse or she could stand. Respect wasn't given, it was taken, and the storm was just beginning.
Sarah held Blake's gaze without flinching, her expression a mask of neutral resolve despite the adrenaline beginning to pulse through her veins. She had been in tense situations before, where lives hung in the balance based on split-second decisions. This confrontation didn't even register on that scale. She took a slow breath, centering herself the way she had been trained to do when facing extreme stress. Blake was clearly expecting a reaction, anger or fear, something he could use to further assert his dominance. When Sarah remained calm, a flicker of confusion crossed his face. It was quickly replaced by increased aggression. He continued his tirade, pointing out that she had likely never spent a night in a forward operating base. He claimed she had never cleared a building under fire, never done anything that really mattered. His voice echoed, drawing even more spectators into the fray. What Blake didn't know was that Sarah had done all of those things and more during her 18 months in Afghanistan. She had been embedded with special operations forces, providing real-time intelligence that saved countless lives. She had been in firefights, pulled wounded soldiers to safety, and made decisions under pressure that saved countless lives. But those missions were classified at such a level that she couldn't discuss them, couldn't use them to defend herself against his accusations. She couldn't refute being called soft or inexperienced without compromising the very security she was sworn to protect. Instead, Sarah simply asked Blake what he hoped to accomplish with this confrontation. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly in the suddenly silent hallway. The question caught him off guard. He had expected defensiveness, arguments, maybe even tears. He hadn't expected to be questioned about his own motivations. He stammered for a moment before recovering, stating that he just wanted to make sure everyone understood the standards of this elite community. He insisted this wasn't some regular Navy assignment where people could coast by on paperwork and politics. Sarah nodded slowly, acknowledging his point without agreeing with the implication that she planned to coast. She said she understood his concerns and respected the elite nature of the SEAL community, but she was here to do a job, and she would do it well. Her reasonable tone seemed to frustrate Blake even more, as if he wanted her to fight back so he could justify further escalation. A senior chief named Rodriguez cleared his throat, suggesting they all get back to work in an attempt to defuse the situation. But Blake wasn't ready to let it go. He turned to the crowd, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he introduced their new intelligence officer. Sarah sat in her cramped office, feeling the weight of the gauntlet Blake had just thrown down. She knew the fight for her credibility had only just begun.
The day passed in a blur of administrative tasks as Sarah immersed herself in classified intelligence reports. She prepared a comprehensive brief on simulated threat scenarios, preparing operators for the chaos of actual missions. Commander Harrison warned her that Chief Blake was influential and dangerous to her mission. Blake saw her presence as special treatment, a challenge to everything he believed a SEAL should be. The conversation shifted to a new, controversial program, integrating intelligence directly into tactical operations. Harrison suggested she needed to show the teams what she could do, not in theory, but in practice. An idea began to form, risky, unconventional, but effective. She would participate as an active player in the exercise. Blake wanted proof that she belonged. She would give him proof on terms he understood and respected. The Mitchell standard wasn't just about intelligence. It was about having the courage to lead from the front. Sarah Mitchell didn't just train, she prepared with a surgical precision that bordered on obsession. She dissected every contour of the training grounds, mapping out the tactical landscape with cold, analytical focus. Scenario objectives were memorized until they became second nature, a mental blueprint for the coming test. Months of desk work had left her restless. The gym and the range were where she reclaimed her edge. The shooting range became her cathedral, a place of repetitive, rhythmic focus amidst the chaos. Loading magazines, acquiring targets, squeezing triggers. It was a meditative ritual for the mind and body. Spatial awareness and steady hands were her natural gifts, but thousands of hours of practice were her forge. Round after round found the center of the target, rebuilding a confidence that had never truly died. The SEALs began to take notice. Word spread that the new intel officer could actually handle a weapon. Whispers filled the range. Some were genuinely impressed. Others remained entrenched in their skepticism. They claimed range shooting was a far cry from the chaotic, visceral stress of a real-world firefight. Sarah ignored the noise. She knew that in the end, only performance would silence the critics. On the third day, Blake appeared, his presence casting a long shadow over the firing line. He watched silently as Sarah moved through a complex drill, transitioning smoothly between rifle and sidearm. She didn't look at him, her focus locked onto the targets appearing in her mechanical periphery. Every shot landed in the vital zone. It was a display of mastery that simply couldn't be ignored. As she cleaned her gear, Blake approached, his dismissal replaced by a cold, calculating curiosity. "Paper doesn't shoot back," he sneered, a final attempt to undermine her growing composure. Sarah simply nodded. She knew the range was only a prelude to the true challenge ahead. She told him she looked forward to the urban warfare exercise, her eyes meeting his without flinching. That evening, she stood before Commander Harrison, proposing something entirely unprecedented. She didn't want to just provide intel. She wanted to be on the tactical team, in the thick of the fight. Harrison was wary, citing the immense risks to her safety and the command's fragile credibility. But Sarah argued that intelligence is best utilized when integrated directly into the kinetic fight. He finally agreed, embedding her with a team of advanced candidates as a transparent, high-stakes test. The announcement at the morning briefing sent a literal shockwave through the entire unit. Blake's objection was immediate and harsh, his tone bordering on open, dangerous insubordination. Harrison silenced him with the weight of command, making it clear the decision was final and absolute. The tension was palpable, a thick cloud of hostility and curiosity hanging over the entire base. The day before the exercise, Sarah performed her final checks, her mind already on the objective.
The morning of the exercise dawned cold and gray, with fog rolling in from the Pacific and settling over the training compound like a damp blanket. Sarah arrived at the staging area before sunrise, finding her team already present and conducting final equipment checks. The 5 advanced candidates were experienced operators, men working toward leadership positions. Their leader was Lieutenant Marcus Webb, a serious young officer. Webb briefed the team on the scenario. They were tasked with locating a high-value target in a simulated urban environment, a maze of buildings designed for this training. The target would be protected by instructor hostile forces, including Chief Blake and his most experienced operators. The exercise used realistic sim rounds. Sarah's role was to provide real-time intelligence analysis. She had access to drone feeds and communications intercepts that she would translate into actionable info. But she had also made clear to Webb that she was tactically capable and could function as a regular team member if needed. The exercise began at 800 hours. Sarah and her team moved into the training area, using the fog as concealment while they established their initial position. The concrete buildings loomed around them. Sarah set up her intelligence workstation in a ground floor room. Within minutes, she identified probable locations for enemy observation posts based on transmission patterns. She passed this info to Webb, who adjusted the route to avoid the most likely ambush points. The integration of real-time intelligence was working perfectly. The team moved with practiced caution, clearing rooms with the smooth efficiency that came from years of training. Sarah monitored their progress, calling out warnings. 20 minutes in, they encountered their first contact. Simulated gunfire erupted from a window, forcing the team to take cover behind a concrete barrier. Webb called for suppressive fire while maneuvering team members. Sarah, monitoring the frequency, heard Blake's voice coordinating the ambush. She didn't hesitate. She quickly pulled up the building layout and identified a likely retreat route the instructors would use once flanked. She suggested Webb position an operator to cut them off. When the instructors tried to withdraw, they found themselves caught in a crossfire. Blake's voice came over the radio, acknowledging the casualties with an edge of irritation. The instructors raised the difficulty level. Over the next hour, Sarah's team fought their way deeper, losing members but successfully neutralizing instructor positions. When a team member went down, Sarah grabbed his rifle and moved up to fill the gap. Webb gave her an approving nod. She was operating on pure instinct now.
The exercise reached its critical phase as Sarah's team identified the building where the high-value target was being held. It was a 4-story structure at the center of the training complex, easily the most defensible position in the entire area. Intelligence indicated that Blake himself was commanding the security element, meaning they faced the most skilled resistance possible. Webb called for a tactical pause. The team gathered in a sheltered position 2 buildings away to plan their final assault. Sarah pulled up building schematics, overlaying them with radio intercepts and thermal imaging from simulated drone feeds. The picture that emerged was daunting. Blake had established a layered defense with multiple fallback positions. Sarah suggested an unconventional approach. Rather than a direct assault, she proposed a combination of deception and speed. They would stage a fake assault on the main entrance to draw defenders toward that position, while a smaller element slipped away. Sarah had identified a less obvious access point in the plans, a maintenance tunnel that connected directly to the basement level. Webb considered the plan carefully. It was unexpected and offered a tactical advantage, but it would split their already diminished force. After consulting the team, Webb approved. He would lead the diversion while Sarah and Rodriguez attempted the infiltration. The plan went into action 15 minutes later. Webb's element opened fire, creating a tremendous noise that drew the defenders' attention. Radio intercepts confirmed that Blake was repositioning his forces to counter the frontal assault. Just as they had hoped, Sarah and Rodriguez used the distraction to move quickly toward the access point. A steel grate set into the ground. Rodriguez pulled the grate open while Sarah provided security. They dropped into the darkness below. They landed in a concrete tunnel barely tall enough to stand upright. Sarah activated her infrared illuminator, bathing the path in invisible light. They moved forward cautiously, reaching a junction with stairs leading upward. Every step had to be controlled and silent. Sarah paused, listening to footsteps and voices above. Defenders were responding to the frontal assault, unaware of the threat below. They emerged into a dim basement storage area. The target was on the 3rd floor. They had to ascend through defended territory. The sounds of simulated gunfire echoed from above, as Webb's diversionary assault continued to draw the defenders' attention. As they approached the 3rd floor, Sarah heard voices. Blake was there directing his remaining forces for a counter-assault. Sarah made a quick decision. Rather than sneaking past, she would use Blake's presence as an opportunity to neutralize the commander. Rodriguez nodded his agreement. In the heart of the enemy fortress, the hunter had become the prey.
In the shadows of the training facility, respect was about to be seized. Sarah Mitchell counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. She and Rodriguez burst onto the landing. Blake was caught completely by surprise. Sarah's rifle was already aimed, her focus absolute. The sim round struck Blake squarely in the chest. A clear kill shot. In less than 3 seconds, surprise had overwhelmed years of experience. In the debrief, the skepticism faded. Sarah's intelligence work hadn't just supported the mission, it had enabled it. She had beaten Blake in his own element. Webb offered a permanent spot on the team. She had earned her place, not through aggression, but through disciplined intelligence and informed courage. Blake acknowledged the truth. He had been outplayed. For Sarah, that honesty was the mission's true completion. The Mitchell standard was set.
The days following the exercise brought a noticeable shift in atmosphere at the training compound. Sarah Mitchell had become a subject of intense curiosity. Commander Harrison moved quickly, announcing a new integrated intelligence program with Sarah as the lead instructor. She threw herself into the curriculum, working 16-hour days to challenge experienced operators with intelligence competencies. Blake's response was complex. He began attending meetings, asking questions that probed for weaknesses rather than dismissing the concept. Sarah compared intel to night vision, a tool that augments human capability. Slowly, a mutual professional respect began to form. 3 weeks later, a real-world crisis emerged. A terrorist cell was planning an attack and Sarah was called to the front. Her briefing was comprehensive, painting a clear picture of the threat. Blake noted it was the best prep he had seen in his career. The mission was a total success. The team neutralized the threat, crediting Sarah's intelligence approach for their survival. Harrison told Sarah she had done the impossible. She had shifted an institutional culture toward a more effective approach. The integration of tactical and analytical capabilities wasn't theoretical anymore. It was proven. This was the Mitchell standard.
The pilot program launched 6 weeks later with 12 experienced operators, including 3 who had been skeptical of Sarah when she first arrived at the compound. Xuan. Blake served as a tactical advisor, bringing extensive combat experience. His involvement sent a powerful message. This was a serious capability development. Xuan. The 6-week course proved to be one of the most demanding evolutions. Sarah pushed them hard, requiring mastery of analysis and tactical proficiency. Xuan. Students learned to process multiple intelligence streams and identify patterns in complex data, translating analysis into tactical recommendations. Xuan. Several students commented that the intellectual challenge was harder than the physical demands, requiring a different kind of mental discipline. Xuan. Blake attended several sessions, observing how Sarah taught. During one complex exercise, he pulled her aside and acknowledged he had been wrong. Xuan. He explained that his hostility was rooted in fear, a fear that standards were being lowered. But seeing her results forced him to reconsider. Xuan. Sarah appreciated the apology. She understood that change could be threatening to those who had invested everything in the existing system. Xuan. What mattered now was moving forward together. They shook hands with genuine respect, a gesture once thought impossible in that hallway. Xuan. The program concluded with a comprehensive final exercise. Teams planned and executed missions using real-time intelligence to adapt. Xuan. The performance exceeded expectations. Operators demonstrated a seamless blend of tactical action and sophisticated analysis. Xuan. Commander Harrison leveraged the success to secure funding. Sarah was promoted and given command of the new school. Xuan. The program attracted attention across the special operations community. Sarah's approach became a model for the entire military. Xuan. Blake remained as a senior instructor. Their different perspectives created a productive tension that improved the program every day. Xuan. 2 years after the confrontation that started everything, the compound held a graduation ceremony for the program's 10th class. Xuan. Sarah stood beside Blake as they watched the newest graduates receive their certificates, representing capabilities once thought impossible. Xuan. The ceremony drew senior leadership from across the community, all interested in the program that had transformed tactical operations. Xuan. Original students approached Sarah to thank her. They shared stories of how these skills had proven valuable in real-world deployments. Xuan. These conversations reminded Sarah why she had chosen this career, the opportunity to make a meaningful difference. Xuan. Blake joined her, and for a moment they simply observed the results of their work together in comfortable silence. Xuan. Then Blake spoke, acknowledging that demanding respect had been foolish. Sarah responded that what mattered was being willing to learn. Xuan. As the sun set, Sarah reflected on her journey. She had silenced her critics not with arguments, but with results. Xuan. She had earned respect the way it should always be earned, through excellence, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to the mission. Xuan.